Hi everyone. In this third part of our chapter on culture, we will examine popular culture, subculture, and cultural change. By the end of this part, you should be able to explain the impacts of both high culture and pop culture or popular culture on our society. Be able to distinguish between subculture and counterculture, how they are all part of our society, but they are how their positionality in relation to the mainstream culture is different, different from each other, and also, of course, different from the mainstream culture. In this section, we'll also learn about the role of innovation, invention, and discovery in culture. So as we already briefly mentioned before, culture is not static, it continually changes. And last but not least is to explain the role of cultural lag and globalization in cultural change. So, high culture and popular culture. Let's start out with this. High culture is defined as the cultural patterns of a society's elite. So for some of you, this thing that might come up to your mind when it comes to high culture is like ballet, orchestra, going to museums, and so on. This is considered as high culture. On the other hand, popular culture is much more widespread and mainstream, and most people know of popular culture, such as McDonald's, icons, as well as certain cartoon or animation characters, Winnie the Pooh, Simpsons, and so on. And another form of popular culture is perhaps graffiti art, which some people say it's in many parts of our society, and it's accessible to most of us. We can see them in the streets, right? We don't have to go to the museum where we have to pay money sometimes or oftentimes in order to see it. Whereas graffiti art is, visible and accessible to most people. Whereas in the previous section, we looked at material and non-material culture, which is one classification of culture. Another way in which sociologists characterize culture is in relationship to the mainstream culture. So in this case, this would include, for example, subculture and counterculture. Subcultures are groups whose values and related behaviors are so distinct that they set their members off from the dominant mainstream culture. Each subculture is a world within the larger world of the dominant culture, and it has a distinctive way of looking at life, but remains compatible with the dominant culture. So that's why it's not considered as counterculture, which we'll go into detail more. So again, subculture is distinct in that even though it has separate ways of living and orientation toward life, it remains compatible with the dominant culture. So U.S. society contains tens of thousands of cultures. Some are wide and broad, such as teenage culture, football fan culture, while there are also some subcultures that are narrow, such as bodybuilding, ethnic groups such as Hmong, Mexican American culture, and so on. I've included here a video called Death of a Shaman. It's a documentary, real life film about a Mian family in California. It's about an hour long, but it's really, really good. I highly encourage you to watch it. I've watched it at least 20 times already, and it's a very touching movie film about the Mian subculture in America, particularly in this, in the Sacramento Valley. So please go ahead and make a bookmark this link and watch it when you get a chance to. Highly, highly recommend it. Countercultures are groups whose values set their members in opposition to the dominant culture. So the word opposition, as you can see, what makes it counterculture and not subculture. So countercultures are often perceived as a threat by the dominant culture because they challenge the culture's values. For this reason, the dominant culture will move against a particular counterculture in order to affirm its own core values. So, for example, the Mormons in the 1800s challenged the dominant culture's core value of monogamy. So in Mormon culture at that time, and somewhat even today, polygamy is acceptable and sometimes encouraged. Please keep in mind that while countercultures are usually associated with negative behaviors, subcountercultures are not, such as hip-hop or rap culture, which has, in a way, absorbed into our mainstream society. Here I've included a very good video to give you an idea of how, culture is, subcultures and countercultures, and how they're similar and different from each other. So please go ahead and take your time in order to watch it. This is a good video. Cultural change is the next part in our section on pop culture, subcultural, and cultural change. So culture is not static. It's constantly changing and moving in different directions. One of the ways in which it changes is because of innovations. Innovation is when new objects or ideas introduced to a culture for the first time. And innovations arrive or emerge from at least two areas. One is discoveries, right? Discoveries is when things and ideas are found from what already exists. So, for example, your book gives you the example that Native American cultures have been in existence for many, many years, and Columbus, coming from Europe, arrived and discovered this culture, the Native American culture already there before he arrived. Okay, so as you can see again, discovery is when things and ideas are found from what already exists. Inventions is another way in which culture can change, or how innovation is introduced to a culture. So invention is a combination of pieces of existing reality into new forms. So, for example, you might think of Steve Jobs and the invention of the iPhone, right? We've had a phone before, and we have BlackBerry, for example, right, in which we can also use the internet on the phone and so on. But he invented a product that is not only functional, but also has a beautiful form, that aesthetically beautiful. So as you can see, he combines the engineering of the phone with beauty, right, with at least aesthetic beauty, in order to make a phone that is very, very beautiful and functional, that many, many people want to buy. Culture lag. When we think of culture, we have to be aware that not all parts of culture change at the same pace. So culture lag is a term for a situation where the material culture changed first and the non-material culture lags behind. So for example, thinking about the different generation in our society and the way we communicate, right? Some generation prefer texting, others prefer emailing, another prefer calling, and some prefer face-to-face communication. So this is a generational difference, perhaps difference in values of how we should communicate to each other, but also, perhaps a part of it is because the values that we attach to how we should communicate is lagging by the technologies that has been invented to create new forms of communication. In this case, for example, texting, right? The new generation perhaps embrace texting more easily than the older generation, who are much more, attached to their own values of how communication should be done. So in this case, it could be face-to-face or calling each other on the phone, for example. So think of a culture and how it's changing. We also have to think of at least two processes, social processes in which culture change. One is either change or shared or permeate our society. One is diffusion and the other is globalization. So diffusion is that's when there's a transmission of cultural characteristic. So for most of our human society, cultures have had little contact with one another, but there has always there has always been some contact with other groups, right? That we learn from other groups, and then that's how slowly we absorb other culture. Now, with technology, cultural diffusion occurs much more rapidly today, right? That we can easily, for example, see what people in Japan are doing by just going online and doing research about Japan or watching the latest news about Japan, for example. Here is you're seeing a model of diffusion of innovation. So blue is innovation, and orange is market share. So as you can see, at first there are very few people use it. So again, orange line, market share, or the percentage of how saturated the innovation is in a particular society. So at first, both innovation and diffusion is relatively low, but as innovation, as diffusion goes up, right, and innovation, there are more and more people adopt it, right, and then slowly, as the diffusion penetrate nearly all the markets, right, that means that more and more people enter. By that time, you have not just innovators and early adopters, you have like late majority, laggards, people coming in and adopting this innovation. And by that time, the market share, or the ways in which the product, the innovation has saturated the market, our society is 100%. Right? That's at its highest. Okay? So a concrete example of diffusion is like, let's say, yoga. Right? So yoga, one point, was exclusive to certain groups of people, perhaps hippies, right, and perhaps even just women. And now yoga has diffused to become quite popular, right? Not just among women, also men, and quite popular around the world, right? It's important to understand that diffusion, cultural diffusion, does not mean acceptance or tolerance. So, for example, I have a picture here of, that says that turban is not a fashion trend. So it's an insult for many people, especially if you don't belong to that particular religion, in this case Sikhism. You wear a turban as a fashion trend is an insult, because for them a turban is a sacred object. It's similar to, let's say, wearing Native American clothing on Halloween. So for some Native Americans, it's insulting because their own clothes is being used for a fun event. It's not being respected, for example, right? Especially if you're wearing the chief's hat, which is sacred and is exclusively for the chief and should be worn just by anyone. So globalization is the integration of international trade and finance market. So by this time, what that means is by this time, culture has diffused and it entered the global scale, that many people are buying the product or the service or this cultural element. Okay, so an example of this is music, right? How it's not only diffused but also become globalized, right? I'm giving you here an example of BTS. BTS is a K-pop band. They've been very popular in Korea, and now, of course, they have become global. They have now been collaborating with many American artists. And so you can see, okay, it started out small, only based in Korea, and now it's going to the US and many other parts of the world as well. So here I'm referencing K-pop, but you probably also heard about K-drama or skincare and so on. So it's very, very interesting to see how now Korean culture is become globalized. Here I've included a video of one of BTS song. It's a remix. It's Mic Drop, and it's a remix by Steve Aoki, who is an American based in California. I think it's a pretty good song, so I hope you enjoy it as well. Okay, so that is a good way for us to end this section on on pop culture, subculture, and culture change. It's the third section of our chapter on culture.